The reason that I wanted to do this particular event is that a lot of creative people believe that they are bad at sales. They believe that they don't like selling, and they find themselves hamstrung in their careers because every time they come to a place where in order to be successful, they actually have to make a pitch, or they actually have to turn a conversation into into a close. They don't know how to make that transition. And because they don't naturally know how to do it, they think that they're just bad at sales. And the truth is that most people that are creative are actually very good at sales for a wide variety of reasons, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I would just point out to you, and I would just remind you that when big companies want to sell stuff to the world, they hire creative people. They hire writers to sell. They hire people that make film to sell. They hire actors to sell. They hire teachers to sell. So it's really the creative people that sell everything in the world. So chances are you're probably pretty good at sales. You just don't quite understand what you're good at. You don't understand the process that you've been sort of innately good at over the years. And this is particularly true if you've had some success in actually working professionally. You've been accidentally making deals or accidentally making connections without necessarily understanding what you've been doing right. So hopefully over the course of this particular event, you'll find out exactly what you've been doing right, and you'll pick up a few key skills that will make it much easier for you to feel very comfortable selling in the future. The first thing that we need to talk about is the fact that creative pros have to be able to package, pitch, and close in order to thrive. And these skills are not hard to master, but it's absolutely critical. And I want to talk about what these terms are so that you understand them going forward, and so that you use them when you're thinking about your own work. The word package means to take what you do or what you have created and turn it into a product or a service that solves a problem or feeds a need that people have. When you're creating screenplays, or you're developing your work as an actor, or when you're developing your skills as a producer, you're always going to be thinking, you have to always sort of be thinking about, what does this thing I've created do? What's good about it? How does it serve people? What problems does it solve? This is one of the reasons why when you hear people pitching screenplays, they might say something like, well, this is a screenplay that's set in a single location, and it only involves 5 characters, and yet it's a murder mystery. It's a murder mystery is kind of the important thing, but the fact that it can be set in a single location, the fact that it only has 5 characters, makes it very easy to produce, right? So it's a set of characteristics that make your solution particularly good. And I will be talking about how to package your work over the course of this particular project, but suffice to say that when you're packaging your work, you're figuring out what makes it valuable to people, what makes it useful to people, what problems it helps them solve. In order for your work to sell, it has to actually meet somebody's need, even if it's creative work. Sometimes a song, for example, is a song to make out by, or a great song to drink while listening to, or a song that makes you feel wonderful when you're hanging out with your friends. A lot of music is sold on the basis of how it makes you feel. A pitch is when you, as a creative professional, state what you do so clearly and so eloquently that the people who need or want whatever it is you're trying to sell understand that you have it and know that you can give it to them. So a pitch is no more complex than you saying, if you like cookies, I have cookies. Or I have chocolate cake. If you happen to like chocolate cake, then I'm the person that you should be talking to, right? A pitch is telling people what you have very clearly. And in order for it to turn into a sale, they have to want what you're selling. So a lot of times people say, I really hate to pitch. It's really hard. And the truth is, people that are good at pitching realize that it's not difficult at all, because the person on the other side of the table either wants what you want to give them, or they don't. And if they don't, no amount of you talking is going to make them want it. If they do, then you can say all kinds of different things and they'll want to buy it. I hope that makes sense. So the third thing we talk about is the word close. Close means allowing people to buy what you're selling. It's when you say, I make the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. And the other person goes, I really love chocolate chip cookies. And you go, really? Would you like to buy some of these chocolate chip cookies? And they go, well, yes, I would. And you say, okay, well, they're $3 each. And they give you the money and you give them the cookies. The close is just you telling them what you have, and them saying, yes, I want it. And you saying, okay, this is what it costs. And then completing the transaction. So in this particular event, we're going to be talking about face-to-face sales, because in my experience, if you can sell face-to-face and in person, then you're going to find selling online easy. And if you don't know how to sell face-to-face, then selling online becomes very difficult. And we'll talk at the end of this particular event about how the skills that you're going to master over the course of the next few minutes can be applied when you're selling books and shows and your performances and so forth online, as well as when you're selling things face to face. Most struggling creative pros focus only on what they want to sell. Their sole focus is on what they want to create, what they want to give the world, what they want to, it's a very internal focus. Like, for example, they think, I want to produce a film and I want someone to fund it, or I want to be a screenwriter and I want people to buy my screenplay. I want to be an actor and I want people to hire me. I want to be a clothing designer and I want to dress wealthy people. And you'll notice that all of those sentences talk about what you want, but they don't talk about what the other person wants or what the other person needs. And I want you to just think for a moment about, let's say that you had a babysitter and the babysitter came to you and they wanted to work for you, and they started out by saying, hey, you know, I'm 16 and I'll come to your house and I'll eat your food and have my boyfriend over and I'll let your 4-year-old watch Friday the 13th. And in that particular example, it's clear that the babysitter is talking about what they want out of their relationship with you. And that is not going to be very compelling as a sales pitch. So when you're in a sales pitch situation and you constantly are talking about your aspirations and your objectives and what you want and what would make you happiest, it's not really usually very conducive to a sale, because what's conducive to a sale is the other person wanting what you have and you letting them have it. So your focus should be on what they want and figuring out what they want, so you can decide if you want to give it to them, and if so, at what price. Your job is to learn about the guy on the other side of the table so you can meet his needs. And then if you meet his needs, or if you can meet his needs, you're in the driver's seat because you're the one who can give him what he wants to buy. And it's very easy to learn how to pitch and close when you're selling something that people want to buy. And when you find, so if you have something great to sell people or something you really like, or that you really enjoy doing, focus on finding people that want that thing. Don't focus just on what you want to create, but look for the people that actually want to buy that particular kind of product or service. And I have to say, there are people that bought pet rocks. So there is a customer for all kinds of strange things in this world. And if you want to create films, let's call it toddler horror stories, little stories where toddlers go around the neighborhood and scare one another, or with stuffed toys. It's like, if you wanted to create a whole show about something like that, you could probably find somebody that would want to buy it, because people bought Teletubbies. People bought, if you think about all the different kinds of content and all the different kinds of media and all the different kinds of performances and all the different kinds of screenplays people have written or created and then sold, there's really a market for almost everything in this world. The trick is being able to find the people that want it and convince them that you have it, so they'll buy it. So sales is very simple when you focus on what the other guy needs, why he wants it, and how you can help that guy get what he wants. 80% of sales is asking questions and listening to answers. And sales, closing a sale, comes from rapport and mutual trust. It means you caring enough to understand what folks want, you caring enough to understand the solution that they think they must have in order to be happy, and you caring enough to be honest with them about whether or not you can give them something that meets their needs. And I think you will find you are much more content going into sales situations or potential sales situations if you realize that literally every single time you meet with someone else, if you can have a conversation where you find out what they want and what solution they think that they're looking for, that's a win. Because first you understand their needs. So if at some point in the future you can give them what they want, you're in a position to do, at least you understand what they want so you can bring it to them. You know what need you can meet for them. And the second thing is that when you know what they want, if you're never going to provide it, you may run into somebody else who actually can deliver what they want, and you can hook those two people together and they'll both like you a lot, right? So 80% of your job in every single meeting is actually asking questions, finding out what people want, finding out what they're trying to buy. One, because you want to sell them what you have, if it meets their needs, or two, because you might run into somebody else who can meet their requirements and you can help somebody else make a deal. And I want to put a quick note, especially for actors. You're kind of the luckiest people in the world, because if you get to go to auditions, and actors can be in a position to meet very large quantities of people, and they get a chance to do a performance. And you might as well, I had a friend who used to say, you might as well just do a great performance. Like, you go in and you think, you look at the screenplay and you look at it and you think, well, they might want me to play it this way, they might want me to play it that way. I'm going to play it the way that I want to play. At least the first time I go through, I'm going to play it the way that I think is most most cool based upon who I am and the kind of performances I like to do, because really I just want to wow them. And maybe it's the case that, it's totally not right for the project they're currently working on. But if I make myself memorable, chances are they're going to remember me. And the next time they run into a part like one that fits me, they'll go ahead and they'll call me in, because they'll go, oh yeah, he was that guy. And if you think about Danny DeVito, one of the things that somebody asked him in an interview once was that did the fact that you were not incredibly tall um, mean make it harder for you in the entertainment industry? And he said it did not. It actually made things easier. And it was because he was really unforgettable. Actors are lucky because it's part of their process to constantly audition. And every single time you go into a room and you make an impression, and you do your best performance, and you shake hands and you meet folks, you've done your job and you get to go home. It's really hard for writers to have that same kind of experience, and it's hard for producers, to have that same kind of experience with studio executives. But with actors, they get that opportunity every single time they go out for a role. One of the first things I recommend that people do is go through the exercise of pretending to be your perfect customer. Let's say that you're a screenwriter and you've written a story that's sort of like The Shining, and it's got a child protagonist. It's a ghost story. It's set in a spooky hotel. And think to yourself, okay, this is what I've created. Now, what kind of person is going to want to buy this particular project? And you'll think, well, it's set in a single location. It's only got 10 characters in it, and it's got a child protagonist. So who would be the most interested in this kind of a thing? And you'll imagine, well, maybe it's the manager or the parent of a child actor, because child actors need to have a great role that's specifically written for children, like a leading role written for children, and that's kind of hard to find. So switch gears and pretend to be that mother, or pretend to be that agent looking for your screenplay. And where would you look? And you'll find yourself thinking, well, maybe I should be on Inktip. Maybe I should be on virtualpitchfest.com. Let's see, maybe I should do some short films that feature kids. If I was looking for cookies, where would I look? If I didn't make cookies, how would I find people that did make cookies? And you actually become the customer, and you start saying, well, I might look online and I might type cookies. Or I might go to a grocery store and I might look in the aisle that has a bunch of other like candy in it. Or I might go to a special shop. I might be in the mall and there's ice cream shops, so why wouldn't there be a cookie shop? And you'll find that the more you actually choose to put yourself in the position of your customer, and you actually start looking for yourself, you start looking in all the places that you as a normal person would look, and you make it so your work is available there, the easier you'll find it to get customers. Really, most people do the same thing that you would do. They go on the internet and they Google things. It's how, one of the reasons I think that people purchase a lot of books and turn them into screenplays is because they're up there on Amazon. And Amazon is so easy to search. They're up there typing things like kid ghost story, child ghost hotel, and they're literally looking for whatever comes up. And they're saying, well, here's a book and it seems to be selling really well. Maybe it's a really good book. Or they read reviews and they go, well, this book got a really good review and I am looking for something that's got a child protagonist. So I guess, I'll reach out to this particular author. So pretend to be your customer and start looking for yourself. And you'll very quickly figure out where you have to put yourself in order to be found. And the first answer, of course, is Google. You really do have to if you're a screenwriter, if I Google your name followed by the word screenwriter, I need to have your webpage come up. And I need to be able to see your LinkedIn come up, because that's when I'm looking for you. Those are some of the first places that I'm going to be looking. As we start to dive in the next couple of slides, we're going to start diving into the nuts and bolts of actually doing sales. But before we do, I want to just say that I think another reason that people get off-put of the notion of being involved in selling their own work is because they're afraid of dealing with bad people. They're afraid of running into somebody that's pushy, or somebody that's overbearing, or somebody who's rude, or somebody who's arrogant. And because they're afraid of running into that bad apple, they don't go out into the world and become proactive in pitching and selling their work, and proactive in finding their kind of customers, because they just don't want to find these bad guys. The truth is that you are going to run into rude people, and it happens on a regular basis. It happens to all of us, and it happens to us whether or not we're actively engaged in selling our work. But rude people really aren't very successful. And when you encounter somebody in a meeting that's rude or arrogant or dismissive, or they're late, or they're demanding, or they're obnoxious, or they're derogatory, the best thing about being in a meeting with those people is the realization that you don't have to work with them. if they're rude at the beginning of a meeting, or they treat you badly at the beginning of a meeting, or they are aggressive toward you at the beginning of a meeting, there's nothing better than sitting there and thinking, well, I don't have to work with you, so I'm going to stay here for a few more minutes, and I'll be polite because my mother raised me well, and then I'm going to go home and I'm going to forget I ever met you. I'm just, because you're not obligated to work with rotten people. You just can choose not to. And my experience is that in most cases, people that behave that way are not very successful, and the people that work with them are not very successful. So you're not really losing anything. I think it may have been the case that, you've run into people in the past and they seem like they were wealthy at that particular time when you first met them, and they were rude and obnoxious or whatever. But you know what? Those people don't stay wealthy for long, because sooner or later, the kinds of ill will that they develop starts coming back on them and starts taking apart the world that they live in. And it's good not to be working with them when that happens. Sometimes you happen to run into people that are not really rotten people. It's just that there are age differences or cultural differences or political difference or personality differences that mean you and they are just never going to be able to work together. Like, communication is just too difficult. It's just too hard to ensure that you're both talking about the same thing, and the words that you say mean the same thing. So one of the reasons that I recommend when you're having a meeting that you spend a lot of time, feeling out the person that you're talking to and finding out more about what they're looking for, and finding out more about their needs, is that when you spend 80% of your time in a meeting or in a pitch doing that, you learn a lot about whether or not you want to work with the person that you're talking to. And you learn a lot about what you have to say in order to make the deal work. And in that process, you may very well discover that you do not want to work with them, and that you do not want to sort of shape your solution or the product or the service that you want to offer them into the pigeonhole that they want it to fit into. So when that happens, it may not be that they're a bad person, but it doesn't really matter. When you go into meetings, or when you go into sales situations or pitch situations, you're really looking for true love. You're looking to go in and talk to people who the more you talk to them, the better you like them, and the better fit they seem for you and the work that you're going to do. You don't want to go into a meeting and from the very first meeting know that there's a problem, and then spend the rest of your time trying to work around that problem, because you spend so much time doing that it stops you from being able to do any other work. And also, you never have the opportunity to do your best work, because you're never working with the kind of people who you're naturally best prepared to work with and naturally inclined to work with. So it's totally okay to go into a pitch or into a meeting and discover the guy on the other side of the table is just not somebody you're going to work with. That's not a failing on your part. I think sometimes people go into these meetings and they think, I'm a failure if I don't walk out of here with some sort of a deal, or I'm a failure if they don't ask for my screenplay, or I'm a failure if they don't want me to work as part of their crew as their cinematographer or as their performer. You're not a failure. You met them, you figured out what they wanted, it's not a good fit, you're moving on. And one of the cool things is I've worked with hundreds of sales professionals in my life, and lots of entrepreneurs. And I can tell you for a fact that that's how successful ones feel. They go into the meeting, they see if there's an opportunity, and if it doesn't work out, they walk right out of it again, and they're just as happy as can be. It's a little bit like if you were walking around your house, opening doors and looking to see if your wallet was in there. You'd open the door, you'd look around. If you didn't see it, you'd close the door and go on to the next place. That's what these people do. That's how every single business meeting is for them. They're just going in, seeing if it's a good fit, and if it's not, they move on. And they have they don't feel emotionally dissatisfied at all. Step one in the process of selling yourself or your products or your services is to come up with a simple statement of your name and what you do in the context of what you're going to pitch. For example, hi, my name is Tina White, and I'm an actor producer who likes to make people laugh. Or hi, I'm Roger Finch French. I write and produce paranormal love stories. Or hi, I'm Mark Smith, Grind on Twitter. I produce cautionary tales. Or hi, I'm Ella Angela Revere. I design and tailor clothing for women who want to be very well dressed. Now, I want you to notice that all of those things provided people with the name that they could Google you by, and provided them with a description of you and what you do in such a way that it's possible to remember it. It's not a paragraph, it's a sentence. Now, there's two reasons for this. One, if people are interested in working with you, or when you meet them face to face, when you have that opportunity, if things go well, the first thing they're going to do is leave that room and they're going to Google you. They're going to start looking you up because they want to find out who you are and whether or not they want to work with you. The second thing is, when they recommend you to others, they need to have a line that they can use that sums you up. And if you write that line for them, there's some chance that they'll correctly introduce you to people. Do you know what I'm saying? If you, if you, if I say I'm Tina Foster White and I went to school, I have a degree from USC as a filmmaker, but I decided really didn't want to work in film. I really wanted to be an actor. And, I really specialize these days in playing people under the age of 25. And I've had 2 roles this year, right? That's 2. How is this person ever going to introduce you to anybody else? Is he going to start? He's going to start with the fact that you went to USC film school, but you're not a filmmaker. I mean, that's crazy. So what you do is you create, come up with a sentence you can use to introduce yourself that clearly identifies what it is you do in a way that, that defines you in the context of what you're planning to sell. And I mentioned in passing that you might come up with several of these lines. If, when I'm talking to you guys, because I teach classes, I might say, hi, my name's Nancy Fulton, and I currently support more than 50,000 entertainment industry pros through online events and resources, right? That might be my pitch. Because what I'm hoping is if I'm introducing myself to you, you'll remember my name because I said it first, and you'll remember the number of people that I support and the fact that I do training, right? But if I were, if I were talking to a producer and I was talking about a screenplay that I'd written and I was interested in having them produce it. My name's Nancy Fulton. I'm a writer producer. And I write paranormal ghost stories or whatever, or paranormal thrillers. So I might change this line based upon who I'm talking to and what I want to pitch them. But you start every single meeting with this statement, and you might come up with take the time to write down 2 or 3 or 4 of them that you can use over and over again. So you don't have to try to make it up on the spot. So when you start talking to somebody, you figure out who they are and what they do, you know how to introduce yourself in a way that makes sense. So you're going to go ahead and come up with a sentence like that for yourself, or 3 or 4 of them, if you do 3 or 4 different kinds of things. Ideally, you want to make sure that your name or whatever you're telling them is unique enough that if they search for you on Google, you're going to come up first. You might be the only one that comes up. And that's one of the reasons you want to make sure you have a LinkedIn account that uses the name that you give them. And you want to make sure that you have a website, and hopefully that includes your name as well. And I mentioned in passing, my name is Nancy Fulton. I have a very common name. There's like 11 in the city of Los Angeles alone. If you go online and you Google Nancy Fulton, I will come up first. And the reason I will come up first is because I've been online since 1996. And I've been marketing constantly since 1996. So I pretty much come up first, right? But if I was starting out today, I would probably be Nancy Fulton Mazer, because there's not another one. And because I would literally introduce myself as Nancy Fulton Mazer. So in the examples I gave you, there's a million Tina Whites, but there's not a million Tina Foster Whites. There's a million Roger Finches, but there's not a million Roger Finch French, right? Mark Smith, he's got a problem, but notice that he tells you that his Twitter handle is imgrind, which is something that you're going to remember. So my point is, if you're just starting out, and it's when people Google your name, they're not automatically going to find you. You might think about modifying your name such that when people Google you, they can actually find you. And you can do that by using a middle name, or by using a nickname like Buffy, right? And a lot of times if you go onto LinkedIn and you search for people, you'll notice that people really do have, Tina White might be Tina White, but people call Tina White, but they call me Buffy White. And so people look up Tina Buffy White. And you'll notice if you go to LinkedIn that there are people that actually have the word Buffy in quotation marks. And that's because that's how they differentiate themselves from all the other Tina Whites. You really do want to make sure that when you meet people and you introduce yourself, that if they like you, they can find you later. And you really cannot trust that if you hand people a business card that they're going to remember it or hold on to it. And in fact, if you find yourself in a situation where you really like somebody, don't give them your business card. If they say, well, do you have a business card? Say no. You go, but if you have one, I can take it and then I'll email you. That puts you in the position of being able to contact them via email, right? So it's it's actually much better not to have a business card and to take their business card, because that puts you in the driver's seat in terms of future contacts. And what's even better than that is being so memorable and so easy to find that they can find you using just your name. So a moment ago, step 1 was coming up with a one-line introduction of yourself that's memorable enough that people can find you if they like you. The second thing that you need to do is you need to clearly define what you sell in terms of the customer's need. And that means for everything that you want to sell, you're going to come up with a sentence. And for example, for a screenplay, you might say, the Lady in White tells a small town ghost story about a little girl who disappeared, a mother who killed herself, and a little boy who moves town to town and sees them both. You might say, another simple statement you might come up with is, I've trained at Stella Adler and spent 2 years off Broadway, and in the last 6 months, I've booked 15 roles as featured performer or lead. Or, I sit with women, we pick patterns, I create a prototype outfits, then I and my team create clothes that fit them to a T on demand. So notice that each one of these statements is, again, it's a simple sentence that you can say about whatever it is that you want to sell, right? So first you have the name where you describe yourself. It's very clear. And then you have a statement that describes whatever it is you're planning on selling. The object is to get the elements you think are most critical out there in the earliest part of the conversation. Those are your hooks. So for example, let's say that you're talking to a producer and you've introduced yourself. Hi, my name is Nancy Fulton. I'm a writer, producer, blah, blah, blah. And then they say, okay, so it's really a pleasure to meet you. So-and-so says, you're a good writer. And I go, so what are you working on? And I go, well, The Lady in White, I have a story called The Lady in White. It tells a story. It's a small town ghost story about a little girl who disappeared, a mother who killed herself, and a little boy who moves town to town and sees them both. If the guy's not looking for a small town ghost story, he's going to be done with me right away. And that's fine. But if he is looking for a small town ghost story, he's going to be really impressed. And he's going to think, wow, this is fate. Because the first thing she said, the first thing out of her mouth was small town ghost story. And that's exactly what I want. So a lot of times people don't clearly define what it is they're selling because they think, well, if he's not looking for exactly that, I'm going to alienate him. But the truth is, you've got to give somebody a reason to talk to you, and you've got to give them some kind of a hook that they actually are natively interested in, that they're actually interested in, or they're not going to want to talk to you at all. If I've been in situations where somebody was trying to sell me on something, and I was listening to them for like 5 or 6 minutes, and I really had no idea why we were talking. I didn't know what they did for a living. I didn't know what they sold, and I didn't know what they wanted, what they were hoping I would do. And it's very stressful because I don't want to be mean to them, but I want to say, look, what do you do, and what are you trying to sell me? Because I don't mind being pitched. I just want to make sure I know what I'm being pitched for. I just want it to be speedy. You want to make sure that these simple statements that you come up about what you're trying to sell, whether it's your performances or whether it's your screenplays or whether it's the films that you make or the TV series you're trying to pitch, get that into one sentence, that you think clearly communicates its advantages, what it's about and what its advantages are in a single sentence. And then you're going to meet as many people as possible who you think would be interested in that particular topic. And you're going to end up using these particular phrases when you contact people via LinkedIn, when you reach out to people via virtualpitchfest.com, when you reach out to agents or managers. These little sentences become something that you use all the time because they're basically your hook. They're what you throw in the water in order to catch the fish that you want. So there's different kinds of meetings. Some meetings happen because you happen to be at a film conference, assuming we ever get back to the time where we can leave our houses. Some are sort of social situations where you meet people and you find out, oh, he happens to be a producer. And so you sort of end up fading into an informal pitch. Other times you have an agent or a manager or a friend who has set you up with an actual meeting. So when you enter that meeting, it's a good idea to have an understanding of what you want to come out of it with. And I remember speaking to an agent, and he said one of the worst things about new writers is they go to the first pitch meeting and they actually expect the studio or the film producer to literally buy their screenplay in the room. And when they're in the meeting, they get really jittery and uncomfortable because that doesn't appear to be happening, even when things are going well. And then after the meeting, they're upset because they didn't get what they wanted. And he says, I spend all of my time coaching them and telling them, look, it's a process. The only thing you want out of this meeting is for them to ask for the script. And then after they've had the script, you're going to follow up and have another conversation with them. And all you want out of that conversation is to know whether or not they liked it. Did you like what you read? Did you tell me your notes? Was it, what did you like about it? What didn't you like? And then if they're interested and they find it something that they want to go forward with, the third phone call will probably be where you actually do the sale. Right? So it's almost every meeting, every sale of something big has the step ladder. And so you should be thinking as you go into the meeting, okay, in this meeting, I just want to find out what it is they want, and I want them to ask for my screenplay. Or in this meeting, I just want to deliver a really good performance, and then I want to find out what they want to have happen for this role. And in this meeting, I'm contacting this distributor, and I just want to find out if they if they actually are currently accepting or currently purchasing films like the one I want to produce. Or I want to find out whether or not they do minimum guarantees, right? So if you keep your objectives really limited, you'll almost always be very successful in your meetings, because you'll be asking for stuff that people can easily give you, that they have no reason not to want to give you. So in most cases, when you have, you're going to decide, well, in this meeting, I just want to find out what the customer needs. Or in this meeting, I'm just going to find out what questions they have for me, and I'm going to answer those questions, so they understand who I am and what I do, and the services that I can do for them, or the product I want to sell them. Or in this meeting, I want them to review my screenplay, tell me the feedback on it, or review the proposal I gave them for my film, to find out whether or not they think it meets their needs. Or in this meeting, I just want them to consider me for a role or for a job. So always know when you go into a meeting, always have some idea of what you want to get out of that meeting. The second thing is, know who you're talking to. And this is really critical for large sales. Don't walk into a meeting with George Lucas unaware that he made Star Wars. So when somebody sets you up with a meeting, or when you're on LinkedIn and you're reaching out to people, and like you're working to sell your screenplay, and you reach out to an agent or a manager, do some research on that agent or manager. If he says, yeah, I'd like to read your work, right? Make sure that you know who they are and what kind of people they represent before you end up on a phone call with them. Know who referred you to them, or how you find them, so you can explain that to them. So I think people in every industry, and particularly in the entertainment industry, and particularly in media, it's a business to a tremendous degree built on connections and building on relationships. If you have a friend who recommended that you reach out to a particular agent or manager, when you talk to the agent or manager, they're going to say, so how do you know Teddy? And you should be able to talk about how you knew the guy that referred you. Well, Teddy and I worked together for a couple of years at MXIE Productions, and he suggested I reach out to you because he thinks we have some interests in common. Or well, the reason I reached out to you is because I've been looking for a group that funds $5 million feature films. Or, well, I always used to shop here, so I decided to put my store here, right? So you're going to have a whole bunch of different, whenever you meet somebody, you need to know explain to them how you're connected to them, or how you became connected to them, because this tends to create and strengthen the rapport that they have with you. And also it makes it so they have the sense that it's not an accident they're in the same room. And then finally, I think it is always nice to leave something behind when you meet somebody, or to follow up your conversation with somebody with something nice that comes in the mail. So sometimes it might be a treatment, it might be a personalized proposal, it might be an invitation to something that, if you're an actor and you're doing a play, when you meet somebody, and you have a good conversation with them, fire off an invitation and invite them to your play. The object is to create a relationship that goes beyond just one meeting. So it's because you do want to have long-term dialogues with people. You do want to have long-term relationships with people. And that really only happens if you actually extend those invitations, or leave behind something that they can refer to in the future that they actually like. It's just really important to some people say you should always send a thank you card. I think that's always nice. But in my experience, having received quite a lot of thank you cards, I actually like it better when somebody invites me to something, or when somebody sends me links to articles that I really like. Or, I can't explain it, but I like it better when what they send me indicates to me that we really did have a sense of rapport. Which brings us to the fourth thing you need to do. When you're in a meeting, or when you have these kinds of interactions, formal or informal, the object is to get acquainted and create a personal connection before you do anything else, or early on. But you want to make the focus on creating a relationship, becoming connected to one another, understanding one another, not dive directly into sales. Because if you try to drive directly into, hey, I have a screenplay, do you want to buy it? No. The conversation is over before they know that you've written 30 other screenplays, because they don't care that you've written 30 other screenplays, because they don't know who you are. So generally speaking, when I go into meetings, if I run into somebody and they seem to really have a strong feeling about how the meeting should go, I sort of let them drive. And usually it starts out with us kind of chatting for a while, like 5 or 6 minutes. And then subsequently, they will literally usually say, so so-and-so says you have a screenplay, or so-and-so says that you're working on producing a film, or so-and-so says you're working on developing a series, or so-and-so says that you act. Why don't you tell me about that? And That's when you come up with your one-line description that we talked about for yourself, and then you come in with the one-line description of what your of what it is you're trying to sell them in particular, or that you think they'd be interested in particularly. And then you should be able to talk for like 4 or 5 minutes about yourself and about your work and about your career. A lot of times when you're pitching a film, or when you're pitching a book, or you're pitching a uh, screenplay, the most interesting to talk about is the story of how you decided to create whatever it is you're creating. And if you're talking to them about a service that you think they might want to buy, like your marketing services and your PR services or whatever, you will want to talk about how you decided to do that for a living. You might say, for example, when we were 6, we moved to a small town and I was sure the cloakroom was haunted, so that's why I write screenplays about ghosts. Or I could never get clothes that fit right, and then I realized I could make them, right? So you're focusing on how you became who you are and how you do what you do. And that does 2 things. 1, it makes them like whatever it is you do better if they're inclined to like it. And 2, it makes them like you better because you've told them where you come from. It's authentic. You may talk about, occasionally it makes sense for you to talk about what other people have said about your work. So, you know, if you happen to have won a Peabody Award or an Emmy, or you happen to have won awards for your writing, or you happen to have you happen to have spent several years on Broadway or performing, and you got rave reviews, then you would talk about those things. You would say, yeah, actually I got really good notices when I was working on Broadway, or when I did summer stock theater. I was really I was fortunate to work with great casts and to do some great productions, and I got some notice, which is one of the reasons I came out to California. You find yourself in a situation where they kind of want you to do all the talking. Usually what you do is you talk for a couple of minutes. You do basically the same thing, but you do it in a much shorter period of time. And then you sort of move on to asking them what they're looking for. You kind of say, well, so, you know, Teddy says that you buy screenplays, or you like to produce screenplays. What kind of things are you looking for, right? You turn the focus onto them, and you start asking them questions about their work. And then you start asking them the questions you need to get to today's yes. You want them to talk about what they want. You want to talk about what they need. You want them to talk about what the criteria by which what they are going to decide to go forward. That you want them to spend as much time as possible talking about themselves and what they're looking for. And also, you may find it's really a smart idea to say, well, you know, have you worked, are there things you really look for in a screenwriter? Are there things that make you particularly happy to work with a given screenwriter? Or do you find all screenwriters exactly the same? Or when it comes to this particular role, are you looking for somebody who has a background in theater, or do you want somebody who, you know, really has focused pretty much only on film performances? And as they're speaking, it's a really good idea to have a pen and jot down notes. And when they have things that they feel very strongly about, make sure when you're reading your notes, not just then in the room, but later when you go home, that you know exactly what they felt most strongly about. For example, you know, I like a writer who can take notes, or I like an actor who is really well trained and very easy to direct, or I like an actor who, you know, gives me a lot of options when they're doing a performance, or I like a book author who writes really quickly and turns edits around really fast, or I like somebody who, if they've got a problem, they really let me know about it up front, so, you know, we can work together to solve it. These notes that you take in that first initial meeting often turn out to be the things that you rely on year after year after year after year. And I recommend that when you take those notes, you take a photograph of them with your camera phone and then email them to yourself for future reference. Because sometimes in this town, you meet 50, 60, 70 people, you know, over the course of a year, and somebody calls up and you're like, oh my God, who is this guy? And if you've written notes, if you've taken notes during your conversation, and you photograph them and you send them to yourself, then when they call you and you hear their name, you can actually go back and look at your notes, and you'll be shocked at how much you can remember. So in most conversations, in a situation where it actually is going to turn into a sale, they'll start, the more you talk to them, the more inclined they will be, if they want to buy what you have to offer, or they're interested in buying what you have to offer, they'll actually start asking a series of questions, which people that work in the sales industry call buying questions. So keep your ears perked up for when people say, how much does it cost? Or what do you normally charge? Or how long would it take? Or what options would I have? Or would you be available? Any question that indicates that they're actually considering working with you, and they're moving on to the part where you talk about price, where you talk about what the terms of delivery will be, and talk about your availability. People don't ask those questions unless they're thinking about working with you. They wouldn't even bother. So when people are not interested in working with you, they won't ask these buying questions. So these, whenever you hear see the questions sort of at the bottom of bullet point 3, that's a really good indication that somebody actually actively does want to work with you, because people don't ask those questions otherwise. When you do hear those questions, you're going to, you really do actually sort of have to respond, and you have to let the person get the answers that they want. And here's the reason. If, let's say, for example, you have cookies, and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, those look like great cookies, I would like to buy one. Well, there's a problem. If you don't actually sell them the cookies, they tend to feel offended, and they feel like there's something mysterious about your cookies and something weird about you. So when people actually start engaging with you in the process of asking buying questions, you need to actually say, okay, you know, basically the last 2 or 3 screenplays I've sold for SAG minimum. Or sorry, last 3 or 4 screenplays I've sold for around WGA minimum, although I'm not a WGA writer. Or, you start giving ballpark information. You don't usually, generally speaking, when they ask questions about cost, you tend to keep things pretty general, because generally speaking, there's problems when you name a price, which we'll talk about in just a second. I think that I found what works best for me is when people start asking questions about cost, or asking about availability, or start indicating they want to move forward. I like to sort of step back at that point and say, look, I think this is interesting. I think I'd like to answer your questions. I need to ask a few questions first, just to make sure I understand what we're talking about. And what you do then is you sort of go through the set of things that you think that they want. You confirm with them, okay, so you're looking for a screenplay set in this location with this number of characters, and it's important to you that it be low budget, and it's important that it have a child protagonist. Or, so you're looking for a performer who can do these 5 things. Or you're looking for a film that it's you only do documentaries that are an hour and a half long, and are suitable for distribution on things like PBS and Nat Geo. So, right? So the reason that you do that is you're confirming their buying requirements. And then you can move on to the part where they confirm that that's the case. And then what you do is you close by asking for what you want. And so you could say, well, I think my script might meet your needs. Would you like me to go ahead and send it over to you? And I'll send over the coverage that I've got, and we can see whether or not it's something you actually want to buy. And that way you're asking for what you want. In effect, you're moving the transaction to being not just about what they want, but moving it to what you want as well. So I send this to you so you can say that so it meets your needs. Or shall I write you up a proposal that reviews, the documentary or the film that I'm planning to produce, so that you can decide if it meets your needs? Or sounds great. Should we schedule a time to start work? And then what you do is you stop talking. So they ask a series of buying questions, and you confirm that you know what they want by repeating it to them, and then you offer to take it to the next step. And then you wait, and they either say yes or no. And what you're looking for is for them to say yes, let's just move forward, or no. And if they say no, they're going to come up with a reason. Well, no, I don't think we should schedule a time yet. And you want to hear why they don't want to go forward, because that's usually, that's the process of sales. If somebody says, yes, I do want these 6 things, but we have a problem on the 7th thing. So you spend some time talking about the thing that that's not working for them. And when you solve that problem, you move on to the part where they actually say, yes, I want to go forward. So when you're in the sales process and you say, okay, you want to move forward, or are you ready to place an order? Are you ready to buy? Are you ready to sign a contract? Are we ready to do the next thing? There's really only 3 answers people can give you. Yes, in which case you just agree on the details and start talking about price and payment and delivery terms. Or they can say no. And they may say, usually this doesn't happen very often, because they don't ask the buying questions, so you don't actually move on to the part where you're trying to sell them. But when somebody says no, there's 2 kinds of no. One no is no because, and they tell you why they think what you're offering isn't a good fit. And then there's no, I just don't want it. It's really hard. You're never going to make a sale to somebody who says, no, I've decided I don't want it. I just don't want it. I don't want to do this thing. So when you get that kind of a no, you just stop. But when you get no because, and they give you a reason, you explore the reason. Well, no, I don't think we're a good fit. You mentioned that you usually get paid SAG I usually get paid WGA minimum. We don't really pay that much for screenplays. Oh, okay. So the problem is price. So then you talk about price for a while and you see if you can figure out a way to meet their requirements. You say, well, could I be a producer? Because I might not mind taking less for the project if I can get a producer credit. Or, well, this is my price, but I have another project. Is there a way that I could interest you in doing two for the price of one? So you help them solve their pricing problem, or you help them solve their delivery problem. Now, sometimes they'll come back and they'll say, no, what you are offering me doesn't have what I need. Like, you have a small town ghost story, and what I'm really looking forward is something set in the city. And you can decide whether or not you're going to change what you're offering them to something else you've done, or you can change what you're offering them by taking your small town project and moving it into a big city project. But you just have to decide whether or not you can make the change that they want. But a lot of times I think people are afraid to do sales because they're afraid that people, when they get to the part where people say they're in the buying discussion, they're afraid that people are going to say something unexpected, but they really can only say three things. If you say, are you ready to buy? Are you ready to move forward? Are you ready to sign a contract? Shall we write up a term sheet? They really only have three answers: yes, no, or no because. And once you understand that there's only three answers to that question, and that there's a response that you make at each, a canned response that you make to each of those three things, you really find sales very easy because you're really just waiting to figure out which answer they're going to give you. Another problem that people have when they're talking about sales is they're concerned about money. They go, well, I don't like negotiating money deals because I always feel like I lose. And the rule with money is he who names a price first usually loses. So if you say that you are whatever you're planning to sell costs $100,000. Well, the guy may have $1 million to spend, and you've only asked for $100,000, so you've left $900,000 on the table. Or if you ask for $1 million, he may only have $100,000, and you press yourself out of his league, and he doesn't want to sell to you because of that problem. So, generally speaking, you just don't want to set a price, and if you want them to set a price. And there's a couple of different ways to ask them to set a price. One is to say, well, do you have a budget for this particular project? Do you know how much you want to spend to get the solution that you need? That's one way to ask them. Another thing to ask them is, well, what do you usually pay, or what did you pay last time? These are questions that let them set the price first. And then you can decide if that price is too low or too high, or you can decide if you're going to change what you're offering them so that you give them what they want, that's slightly less than you would normally give them at the price that they want. I found out that if you try to get them to name the price first and they won't do it, and they want you to name the price first, what I found is I say, well, I just want to make sure that I understand what you're looking for. And I just walk again through what they need and what I'm providing. And by the time I've gone through it the second time, usually what happens is they really do want it if they're interested. And then they will say a price because they're just tired of going around in circles. So you will do much better in negotiations, almost always, if you make the other guy name the price first. The longer that people talk about their needs, what they want, how you can help them, the more interested they become in working with you, the more willing they are to name a price, and the higher that price is generally going to go. I have seen people negotiate deals quickly, occasionally, at a better price than they would normally get, by telling people, if you can say yes now and move forward, then at this price, then we can go ahead and do a deal. Otherwise, I'm going to have to move on to something else. And if you've ever had a situation where you've done like 3, 4, 5, and 6 meetings and you never really got to the buying discussion, using this last line on the page, okay, well, if you can say yes today, then we'll go ahead and move forward. Otherwise, I think we should just go move on to other things, because that takeaway, that saying, well, I think I'll just walk away from this conversation now, sort of forces them to decide whether or not they're going to name a price and then move forward on cutting a deal, or they're just going to step back. And that makes it so you get your time back. Because there are a lot of people in this town, and there's a lot of people in the world, but especially a lot of people in this town, who really just enjoy having meetings, and they will keep you coming back again and again and again. And this solves that problem. It basically says, well, if you can say yes, you want to move forward now, then we'll go ahead and we'll do a deal. Otherwise, we'll just sort of go ahead and move on. And at that point, you can ask them, so what do you want to pay? And if they don't come up with something, they're not interested in doing a deal. So we just sort of ran through a series of steps. You being able to introduce yourself, being able to describe your product, knowing who your customer is, knowing what they want, and how your product meets their two or three of their most basic needs, their most specific needs, and then the process of closing, which is making sure that what you're selling them is at the price that they usually buy at. These 5 steps are also pretty much what you do when you're selling online. If you're good at selling face to face, or you become comfortable selling people products and services face to face, it's strange, you become pretty good at selling things online as well, because it's really pretty much the same process. If you're selling custom clothing to people, you very quickly figure out, well, my customers are women who are 40 to 70 years old, who like to be very well dressed. They earn at least $150,000 a year because they're going to be paying me $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 for a wardrobe. And that when you have those characteristics, it's easier for you to go on Facebook and run ads to that target demographic. And you already know that those people want what you provide because you've met their kind of people face to face. When you know teens love your comic book, and whenever you are going to a conference like Comic-Con and you have this little video you show, and people walk past your booth and watch the video and then look at your comic books and decide to buy, you pretty much know you're going to use the same exact ad on YouTube, and you're going to have a link in there that points to your website where they can buy your comic book, right? So selling face to face makes it easier for you to sell your work online because you understand who your customer is, you understand what they want, and you understand the triggers that make them decide to buy. It's one of the most important things that you can do is make sure that every single time you find yourself in a situation where you are in a meeting, or where you are pitching somebody that you happen to have met at a social event, or pitching somebody or talking to somebody, and discover that you find yourself in the middle of a pitch when you are at a conference or at some sort of industry event. The most important thing is not the sale, it's the relationship between you and the person that you're talking to, and your understanding of what it is they want. The most important information you'll get is the answer to the question, who are they and what do they need? Because that information, when you have it, helps you decide if you can sell them something that meets their requirements. And it also gives you a contact that you can introduce to other people who may have the solution that they need. So spend more of your time focusing on building relationships and understanding what people want than you do on trying to actively push your work onto other people. It's very important that you not sell stuff to people that they aren't going to be happy with. Good sales professionals know, people who sell houses, everything, from people who sell houses, people who sell buildings, people who sell services, people who sell anything, will tell you that what makes them wealthy is not the individual sale. It's the people who buy from them 5 or 10 times over the course of their life, or the people who introduce them to 5 or 10 or 20 people over the course of their lives. So every single time you sell somebody something they don't want, or every single time you do a deal with somebody that leaves them feeling burned, what you end up with is somebody who will never work with you again, and somebody who will not feed you future contacts, and may even say disparaging things about you in years to come, because people in Hollywood do tend to have a very long memory. Good business people, successful business people, understand what we've covered today. And when you meet them, you'll find that they're pleasant to talk to. They have a natural interest in what it is you do, and they have a natural interest in helping you. People who are bad at business make you feel rotten for trying to help them, make you feel uncomfortable telling them what you do, or describing what it is you have to sell, and always make you feel like you are asking for too much money. Don't do business with the rotten business people, because the more time you do business with them, the less money you make in the long run. They don't introduce you to other people. They don't create good relationships with you. They don't create good relationships with other people. They treat everybody the same way. So they're just they turn into like this kind of cesspit where you end up working with them, and it kind of prevents you from working with much better people. So step away from people who don't do business well. Make sure that you research the people that you work with. I have a lot of resources that talk about how to do due diligence. And remember, I always tell people that the bigger your deal is, the more important it is for you to investigate who people are. Look them up on LinkedIn. The due diligence book has like a dozen things you should do before you do a deal with somebody, in addition to getting a lawyer, to make sure that the deal is legitimate, and that if people don't fulfill their obligations, you can terminate the deal and get back your screenplay. or if you're an actor, you can get compensated for the work that you did, even if the project doesn't get finished. Remember that your job is not to good business in good business relationships. Everybody ends up getting what they need. So when you find yourself working with somebody that's high pressure or thinks only of their own obligations, the best punishment you can give them is just not to work with them. Go find somebody better to work with. Because if everybody does that, they will not make any money at all. And so I think a lot of times we think we have to do business with people who are rude or badly behaved, or who are too lazy to create clear contracts or clear agreements, or never end up paying their bills. And I just think the more time you spend with those people, the less time you're going to end up working with people who are actually worth working with. I really enjoy doing sales. I enjoy figuring out what people want, even if I can't meet their needs. I like connecting them to other people. So hopefully you'll have the same experience. It's actually very empowering, and I do hope you have that experience. So cool, and thank you, thank you, Marty. You're very sweet. All right, thank you very much, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and turn this recording into something that you guys can watch tomorrow, and I'll add it to the set of resources. And so, and like I said, I'm always available on tap if you need help. Okay. I really enjoy helping you guys, or being supportive to you. Talk to you later.